So we recently did our 2026 off-season winners in MLS, but today we're going to be doing our 2026 off-season losers. And this is based on not if the team's going to be bad in 2026, but did they do enough to be better in 2026? Before we get into that, make sure you guys smash the like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. 190 subscribers away from 12K. We're getting closer and closer. So make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of our videos. So let's start off with number 5 of the teams who had the worst offseason. And this one might surprise you a little bit, but I have to have LAFC. LAFC was a team that was scorching hot last year heading into the playoffs, and they ended up losing to the Vancouver Whitecaps. I expected a very, very active offseason. I expected them to hire a good coach. I expected them to add a DP. I expected them to go all in and try to make this team as good as they possibly could be. Maybe even the Western Conference version of Inter Miami. And they did the complete opposite of that. Let's start off with the head coach. They hired Mark Dos Santos, who is the assistant of Steve Cherundolo, the former manager in 2025. And that is just such a lackluster hire. Mark Dos Santos has a losing record historically throughout all his coaching stints that he's been a manager. He's 50 years old. He's uninspiring, especially for a club like LAFC. They could have hired a way better manager and a bigger manager than Mark Dos Santos. It just felt like a lazy friend hire by the front office because they didn't even really cast their net far and wide like they claim they did. And it just feels like this is just a very, very bad decision going forward. So that kind of set the tone for this bad offseason. Then they let go of Andrew Morin, who I thought was very good in some points in the 2025 season. I thought he was the most creative player. They lacked creativity in the final third outside of Son Heung-min and Denny Bwanga, but they had no service whatsoever. They let him go. He goes back to Brighton. And they did sign Budry, who is a Swedish international. He's a U22. I don't know if he's going to be good. I don't know if he's going to be bad. The reason why it's underwhelming is because they have a DP spot open. They could have went out and signed a big time. And when I say big time, I don't mean big name. I mean go sign a talented playmaker who could help set things up for their attackers, which they needed. There was, like I said, there was no creativity between Tillman, Delgado, and Chouanier when they were playing, and that's something they needed. That was the biggest need this team had heading into the offseason, and they failed miserably. They did trade for Jacob Schaffelberg, who was pretty good for Nashville SC, very pacey, kind of hit or miss when it comes to his finishing ability or how he gets or his playmaking ability, creating chances. But he does have pace, and I do think he's a good depth piece for LAFC. But it just feels like LAFC really wanted to wait until the summer, which I don't get. You have Son Heung-min, you have a star in the league who balled out, and like I said, they finished third in the Western Conference. They were incredible. Denny Bwanga and Son Heung-min scored like 17 goals in their final 8 games, which is unheard of in MLS, at least between two players. It just felt like they were going to really push, and they didn't do that. They didn't do that. Now, they did sign Eustáquio on a loan, the Canadian international, and I think he has a 7 million euro purchase option if they want to activate that, which would make him a DP. Don't do that because he's a defensive midfielder. That's not what they need. I don't really think that was the big issue. They needed a playmaker, but I do think it's a good addition for this season, but it's not exactly what they needed. So we'll see what happens. I also think they needed some center back help. We'll see what happens going forward, but it just feels like it's a huge missed opportunity for LAFC. At number 4, I have the Philadelphia Union. The Philadelphia Union won the Supporters Shield in their first year under Bradley Cardinell. Bradley Cardinell, great manager, unjustly fired at St. Louis City SC in 2024. And we see how they've been since they let him go. Not good. So he was not the issue. They bring him in. They win the Supporters Shield, first place the entire league, and they kind of, disappoint in the playoffs. And then they do this rebuild where they start getting rid of some of their other guys. They got rid of Daniel Gazdak last year or in late 2024, who was a very important player, but they didn't need him. They were good this year. But then they got rid of Ty Baribo. who was the Golden Boot winner of the team or the leading scorer of the team, 19 goals in 2025. They sold Kai Wagner, who had been rumored to be leaving for several years. And then they traded Jacob Glesnes, who was the defender of the year in 2023. And I think he was the runner up in 2025. It just feels like they're going through a rebuild. They're going through a rebuild. Now they did sign Gainer Martinez. They did sign Agustin Aneo. They did sign some players, but these aren't proven players. These are still talented players, but they're getting rid of pillars of what made them so successful in 2025. A lot of people think Guy Wagner was the best left back. I agree. Got sold to Birmingham City. Ty Baribo was incredible. I mean, he's one of the best strikers they've had since I can remember. And then obviously Jacob Glesnes, 31 years old, very, very reliable center back. Now, some people thought maybe he was taking a step back and starting to decline, but either way, just a lot to get rid of. I expect the Union to take I don't want to say a huge step back, but I still think they'll be a playoff caliber team, but I don't think they'll be anywhere close to the first seed in the Eastern Conference in 2025. I'm not going to give a prediction yet, but I mean, I don't know what they're thinking. Why would they get rid of so many different people? And obviously, Kai Wagner had been rumored, like I mentioned, but they only sold him for like $2.5 million, 2.5 million euros. That's just such a steal for the caliber of player that Kai Wagner is. It makes you wonder if other players are on the chopping block too, like Andre Blake, who is the best goalkeeper in MLS history, in my opinion, and he's been with the Union since 2014. Makes you wonder if his days are numbered as well. But we'll see. Bradley Cardinale has never given me any reason to doubt his ability, but maybe these are decisions beyond his making. Maybe he's not doing this. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what they end up doing in 2026. But I think it's a very disappointing offseason for the 2025 supporter shield winning side. And I guess we'll just see what happens going forward. At number 3, I have Sporting Kansas City. Sporting Kansas City, man, talk about a team that's just so forgettable at this point. They just recently sold their team. I think they were valued at $700 million, and then they had an investor pay 70% of whatever that is. Not gonna do the quick math on the video, but they had someone just recently take over as the majority owner of Sporting Kansas City, and I expect things to probably change. They fired Peter Vermees, who had been there since 2009 last season, about I think it was like 12 games in. That needed to be done a long time ago, way sooner than what it was, right? He had become very stale. So they have really never adapted to the current MLS. Now they do have a DP, Manu Garcia. They did trade for Joveljic last year. They let go of Eric Tommy. They just really, really need to have a revamp to adapt to the current MLS structure, spend some money, use their U22s more effectively or use them at all. They just feel like they're stuck in MLS 1.0. Now, they did hire Rafael Wiki, who was the manager with the Chicago Fire a couple years back. He didn't really pan out. He didn't make the playoffs a single year. We'll see what he can do in his second stint. Maybe he'll be better when he has more funds to. I mean, not that was a huge issue with Chicago, but Sporting Kansas City seems like they're going to turn a page and they are going to start spending more money. The reason why I don't have them is I have them as offseason loser because they didn't really do much because they're transitioning through an ownership change. They're going to be probably active in the summer, and I think the owner said that money is no issue with him. Like he will spend whatever it takes to make this team competitive. I don't know if they're going to be back to the 2009 through 2013 quality that we saw with the club because it's going to look different. But all I know is they had 28 points. They finished last place in the Western Conference in 2025, and they really didn't do much to improve their team in 2026 thus far. So it's hard to get worse, but they didn't get much better. So we'll see what Sporting Kansas City does in 2026. But I have them at number 3 as the biggest offseason losers. The only reason they're not number 1 is because they did have a new owner come in who I do think is going to change things up quite a bit. All right, number 2 on worst off seasons in Major League Soccer is the Seattle Sounders. Oh, man, the Seattle Sounders. Very frustrating team, right? This is a team historically with so much ambition. They do. Anyone saying they don't is just gaslighting. That's not true. They were the envelope pusher. They were the change makers in MLS for a long time. They were. It just is what it is. They signed Clint Dempsey, Obafemi Martins, Nico Ladero. When these new rules were implemented, they were always taking advantage of them. That's what they did. So this offseason, I said it was the most important offseason in Seattle Sounders history because they had just won Leagues Cup in 2025 and they got bounced in the first round of the Western Conference playoffs. So they needed to get something different. They needed a striker. We were told last summer that they were going to get a striker, U22, and they didn't do it. They didn't do it. They were trying to get Noah Ohio, and it didn't work out. So then they move on. They say, well, it just, we're going to roll with the roster we have. They get a free pass because they won Leagues Cup. So everybody kind of they forgive them, right? Well, then they just embarrass themselves against Minnesota United, and they get bounced in the first round of the playoffs. They lost, and they should not have lost in that first round. Okay. So this offseason, clean slate. I thought they were going to get a U22 striker. I thought they were going to try to use some of the GAM they have. They have like $5.5 million in GAM. I thought they were going to improve this roster. Even if they don't sign a big time player or spend a significant fee on the player, I thought they were going to round out the edges of this roster. They didn't do that. They got worse. They sold players. They got rid of Obed Vargas. They did not re-sign Kent. They got rid of Danny Leyva, sold them off, but they still got rid of him with no significant replacements. The only guy that they signed of significance, who I don't even think that they really want, is not that they don't want, but the club was dying to get rid of him, was Nikola Pekovic. He's a U22 player for Charlotte FC. He is still going to take up a U22 spot for Charlotte FC and just get on loan to the Seattle Sounders. So they wanted rid of him so bad. They're like, we will keep him on our books as a U22 as long as you take him. That's a red flag. And they still the Seattle Sounders have the worst collection of any team that has 3 DPs. They have the worst collection of DPs in Albert Rusnak, Jordan Morris, and Pedro de la Vega. Worst trio of DPs in the entire league. So it just feels like this team they have been so fortunate to consistently be competitive, but the way they've ran business the last several years, it feels like their day is coming where it's going to fail miserably. It's going to fail miserably. They finished 5th in the Western Conference, 55 points. And the reason why they did that is because they really, really struggled earlier in the season, and they were paying for past sins at the end of the year. So the Seattle Sounders, I can't wait for the day until they're sold and they get an ownership group who is very invested in spending the money it takes to make this club great again. Because the Seattle Sounders, people forget, made 4 MLS Cups in 5 years. They won 2 of them. Haven't been to an MLS Cup since 2020 and haven't won an MLS Cup since 2019. So very disappointing offseason for the Sounders. I have them at number 2 is the most disappointing offseason losers on my list. At number 1. Now, this team, if they could get relegated, they should. It's Montreal. Montreal is one of the most disappointing projects I have ever seen. And I plan on doing a video about them at some point because of how sad it's become. Like, they're just totally checked out, and it makes you wonder what's going on up there. They are not reject FC, but they are sloppy seconds FC. Like, we will take whoever you don't want, bring them on over. We have no ambition. The only true DP that they have, I don't think they even have a DP right now. I don't think they even have a true designated player. I think that you can buy down all of their players right now. And the DP they had last year, I say sloppy second, FC, they have Rioni they got from New England who they didn't even want. They traded for him, and he was a DP for Montreal, and he wasn't good. The only move that they've done significantly, they did sign Brian Vera, and they traded for Toto Alvarez or got him on loan from Inter Miami, but it's not enough. Last year they got Jalen Neal from LA Galaxy, and I don't think he really did much for Montreal. It just feels like the team that had Marco Di Vaio or Ignacio Piatti or Didier Drogba, that team is way far gone. Like, this is what you call a bottom feeder team in MLS. Like, they are not going to win jack, you know what. Not happening. They're not doing it. They're not going to. And this is where the parity argument really starts to go away is that I can guarantee you that Montreal will not win MLS Cup. So the narrative that any team can win it this year is BS. They can't. They're not going to. They're not even going to make the playoffs, Montreal. They're not going to even make the playoffs. And it's because of the way the entire organization is ran from top to bottom. They're the worst team in MLS. So they have had a terrible offseason because they always do. They're going to be bad again because they always are. And something needs to change. And like I said, I'm going to do a deep dive video on this about what's wrong with this team. And I think you guys will be interested in that. So be on the lookout for that. Might come out in the next couple weeks. But my God, Montreal, just sell the team already. Sell the team already. I mean, it's absolutely pathetic. 28 points, 13th in the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference is deep. So that's why they're not going to be they're not going to be much. They're not going to be any better. Everybody else got better. They're not going to be better. So we'll see what happens. But that's my 5 biggest losers of the 2026 MLS offseason. I'm curious to see what you guys think. Who are your 5 biggest losers? Do you agree or disagree with my list? Let me know down below in the comment section. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you guys give us a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and hit that little bell notification so you never miss any of our videos. Until next time, guys, I will see you all soon.